Mm-mm. All right.
All right. And we'll watch the door for people who come in as we go. Welcome to our tea talk. Thank you for those of you who are here with us, and hello to everybody who is watching later on. It is March 20th today, and we have myself and Lauren, and our special guest and teacher today is Darren Crouch of Passages International. I'm going to read just a little formal intro of why he's here, and you'll quickly be like, oh, yeah, of course he's here, because our missions align very well. So, this presentation is called Green Light on Green Funerals, and it highlights the growing and proven demand for sustainable and meaningful death care solutions. This presentation by Passage's CEO, Darren Crouch, emphasizes how Passages has provided biodegradable, eco-friendly funeral products since 1999, which is a long time ago in this particular space.
Yeah,
So, the beginning.
we
In
got
this
the OG
presentation,
here.
the OG. In this presentation, the audience will learn how Passages is helping funeral homes cater to modern environmental concerns and to families seeking affordable and dignified experiences. Viewers will also learn the benefits of green burial and cremation options, including fair trade and Green Burial Council certifications, and see a showcase of products that offer value and greener alternatives to traditional packages. Passages encourages funeral homes to meet families' evolving preferences, demonstrating how greener products can increase customer satisfaction, engagement, and revenue, all while leaving a lighter footprint. And what's cool about that is, even though it sounds, like a good sales pitch, a good elevator speech, is it's completely true. Like, it's really exciting for those of us who are learning about this to see how, the greener it gets. Like, yeah, it's better for families, it's better for the environment. I'll shut up and let Darren talk because he is our speaker today. So welcome and thank you.
Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. I've been in this space for many years, and I guess I'll start with a little story that sort of illustrates some of the issues around this. So I kind of married into this business. My wife is the daughter of a local funeral director, and her brother and I started this company. And one of the reasons that he started the company, because he had seen a change in the families that were coming in to make funeral arrangements. And one particular family was a close personal friend of my brother-in-law, Tim. His name was Ted. And Ted had the misfortune of having to make funeral arrangements for his two young daughters and mother-in-law, who were tragically killed in a car accident. And this was within a year of his wife dying of cancer. And so, my brother-in-law, being a funeral director and caregiver, obviously wanted to give the highest level of care and provide everything he could in this tragic situation to his friend. And, his friend Ted selected cremation, as he had for his wife, who passed away several months earlier. And when Tim got to the point in the arrangement process for Ted to select an urn for the cremated remains of the two young girls and mother-in-law, Ted said, I don't want an urn because I'm going to scatter the remains where I scattered the remains of my wife. And so back then, 25 years ago, Tim really didn't have very many options for scattering. Everything was bronze, marble, wood, ceramic, what you see on TV when there's a scene surrounding cremation, right? The urn looks like it's from the 1500s, let alone the 1970s. But the sad part of the story was, obviously, beyond the tragic situation that Ted and Tim found themselves in, was that Tim had to give one of his best friends the cremated remains of his two daughters and mother-in-law in a basic cardboard box. And he said to himself, this is not right. There's got to be something better from a environmental perspective, from a dignity perspective. And he's also a business person. From a business perspective, how do I give someone the cremated remains of a loved one and then turn around 10 minutes later and give them a bill for $2,000-3,000 having just done that? So, even though our company focuses on environmental and sustainable products, that's my personal passion and belief. The company really was founded out of a need that we saw inside the industry. And a lot of that, you'll see in my presentation, comes from a changing consumer preference landscape. So let me see if I can get these going here. Yeah. So, who is Passages? I just basically kind of give you a little bit of insight into who Passages is. We solve problems that often funeral professionals don't know they have. We enlighten them on some of the issues, and we provide them with solutions that can meet the needs of the new consumer. Because as I mentioned, the industry's changed. Well, let me back up there. Maybe this is not an accurate reflection. The industry probably hasn't changed as much as I would like to see. What's changed is the consumer, right? The customer wants to spend their money and remember people in a different way. They don't want the same cookie cutter, religious service, preparation of the body, stuffiness, cookie cutter nature, and expense of, what the funeral looked like 10, 15, 25 years ago. And so we work primarily through funeral homes to help them meet the needs of consumers that want natural and biodegradable options. We've looked, since we focus on the green space, we focused on, how can we green the cremation process? Because those of you that know cremation know that, I think consumers perceive cremation to be greener because you're not using a casket, there's no vault, you're not taking up space in the ground. But the reality is there is a carbon footprint with cremation. And when 60 to 70% of people say they're going to select cremation, we need to address that because, how can we make it a little greener, knowing that a significant number of people are going to choose cremation? And we know there's a desire for people to be more involved and take back, what the death rituals look like versus, having it turn into a very sanitary, industrial type process. And I think people are looking, just like they did with, the birth of a child not always happening in a hospital, or a wedding ceremony not happening in a chapel, just like the other big life rituals, people want to do it in a different way and have more control over it. So, we help funeral homes who ultimately help families with, what a modern memorial or ceremony or goodbye might look like. So we've been doing it since 1999. We have a comprehensive selection of products, both urns, caskets, scattering products. And, I like to think of the company as a death style brand, much like other companies might be a lifestyle brand, right? So how do we help people leave this world in a way that represents the way they lived in this world? And, we want to be a part of that conversation, in particular as it pertains to sustainability, renewability, meaning, and probably most importantly, experience. What kind of experience do people want to have to celebrate and remember a loved one? And I think that's really the big thing that has changed. The experience that people wanted 25 years ago is very different from the experience people want today. So if we look at data around green, if we talk about green first, there's a lot of independent data around it. Kate Boylston publication publishes the American Funeral Director magazine and the American Cemetery magazine. And you can see that, especially on the chart on the right, 9 out of 10 people think that being environmentally friendly when it comes to funerals is important. That's a huge number. More and more people are familiar with it. And if you look at some other data, another organization, the NFDA, National Funeral Directors Association, it's over 60% of people say they're interested. When I got into this business, the Prius had just come out. Whole Foods was a tiny company, not owned by Jeff Bezos. And so, when I look back at the data, really funeral professionals could afford to ignore it. Today, these numbers show that, this is going to be a significant part of what funeral homes have to provide families, just like the auto industry. Electric vehicles are going to be a significant part of what car makers need to provide to their customers. For the most part, when people are asked about planning a funeral, most of them intend to do it with a funeral home. And so the most of our business is is to funeral professionals, and we support them and educate them on these new desires from consumers. You'll see, you know, obviously cremation. I think this is what is actually happening versus what people say they want to do. But you can see green burial as a percentage of casketed burial or conventional burial is a pretty significant chunk. And so, you know, we know that cremation is the largest piece of the pie, followed by casketed burial. But with inside, you know, those two things, green burial has a pretty significant role to play. And I think that's going to continue to grow. You know, and we feel like if funeral homes are not offering these products, are not educated on these products, don't know how to sell these to families, don't know how to identify families that may want something different, then they're leaving, you know, a lot of money on the table. Because as I spoke earlier, you know, consumers, it's not that they don't want to spend any money on their loved ones. They just want to spend it on different products and in a different way. You know, the other big trend in the funeral industry that a lot of funeral homes are looking at is, you know, reception centers. So they took out their casket showrooms and replaced them with reception centers because they feel that people want to have receptions to celebrate. They don't want to spend 10 grand on a casket, but they will spend 10 grand on a reception. So where does this come from? Well, I mean, I think we all know, you just have to look around, that people are concerned about environmental issues, no matter what your political persuasion is, whether you call it global warming or climate change. You know, the reality is that, you know, this planet is only so big, and there's only so much that we can take from the planet. And I've read statistics about, you know, by 2050, there'll be more plastic in the ocean than there are fish in the ocean. So people are much more aware of environmental issues. They're living more sustainable and renewable lives. They're concerned about those things. They're willing to pay for products and companies that provide more sustainable products. And this translates into death as well. You know, the other thing is that when you look at the traditional or conventional funeral industry, it is not at all sustainable. You know, I've read data, you know, you could build a 2-lane highway back and forth from New York to LA every year, given the amount of concrete we put in the ground for vaults. You could fill 8 Olympic swimming pools with the amount of embalming fluid we put in the ground every year. We could build the Golden Gate Bridge every year with the amount of steel we put in caskets. And so, you know, the environmental impact of conventional funerals is pretty intense. You know, people are also, like I said, they're spending their money with companies that take a stand or make a difference. You know, whether it's Whole Foods or Tesla or, you know, one of the airlines. Everyone is aware of sustainability and understands that consumers are, you know, it's not so much a nice to have, it's almost more of a must-have today. And I think as the younger generation becomes a bigger economic buying power, it will definitely be a must-have. So if we kind of jump into green or natural burial, you know, there are shades of green with everything, both with products and with cemeteries. You know, there's a dark shade of green and a light shade of green. And so if we look at the definition of green burial from the Green Burial Council's perspective, you know, the green burial is a way of caring for the dead with minimal environmental impact and conserving natural resources, reducing carbon emissions, and protecting worker health, with a focus on restoration and preservation of habitat. And so, you know, what the Green Burial Council is trying to do, and what I believe in, is to be looking at cemeteries in a very different way. So if you look at the images on the left, you know, that's what conventional cemeteries have historically looked like. And the cemeteries on the right are what cemeteries could look like. They could look like parks and areas where we could spend time in nature, which is very different from what it's traditionally been. You know, if you look at the difference between natural or green burial and conventional burial, you know, generally speaking, natural burial is going to happen at a shallower depth. It's going to involve the use of a eco-friendly, sustainable, biodegradable container that will return to the earth, that doesn't have toxic finishes, doesn't have plastic, doesn't have zip ties, doesn't have polyester or synthetic linings. Um, is usually not doesn't have a manicured lawn, is not fertilized, has like a natural headstone, those types of things, and really looking to have a minimal impact on the environment, number one, and then allow the body and any kind of receptacle that the body is in to return to the earth in the most natural way. There are other processes out there that try to mimic this in a artificial and industrial way. Whether we look at alkali hydrolysis or natural organic reduction, those are ways of doing what Mother Nature knows how to do on its own and does it for every other living creature on this planet. Excuse me. We could also look at hybrid burial. Hybrid burial is a way to take advantage of the existing cemetery space that we have and conduct burials in a different way within a conventional cemetery. So there are cemeteries out there that will allow conventional burial and natural burial right next to each other. And I think that is a really great thing, because it's very difficult and time consuming and expensive to open cemeteries and get planning permission and all those types of things. And often there's a lot of opposition to new cemeteries. So why not look at all the cemeteries that are already in existence and look to find ways to make them greener? And so I know there are cemeteries out there that will, old cemeteries, historic cemeteries, big cemeteries. Riverview Cemetery in Portland lies on the banks of the river, and there in Portland has some of the founding fathers of Portland buried there in massive, monuments and those types of things. And they'll do natural burial anywhere there. And so it is possible. And, this goes back to what I originally said, which was about the educating cemeterians that, yeah, there's some people that might want a vault and see value in a vault and be prepared to pay for a vault, but there's other people that don't want a vault and don't see the value in vaults and want to go back to the earth naturally. Obviously, there's conservation burial as well. This is probably the darkest shade of green, and it factors in ecological considerations, impact assessment, conservation easements, those types of things. And there are cemeteries out there that are doing an amazing job of that. Unfortunately, we don't have enough of these cemeteries. I mean, if you look at what's going on in England or what has happened in England, England has, is a tiny fraction of the size of the United States and has almost as many green cemeteries in England. And so, we're behind the times here in the US in terms of, making this a priority and making this available to people that want it. And the challenge that I see a lot is that, the consumer's already there. People already want that. I've showed you the data at the beginning of this presentation. The challenge, I think, has always been is to get funeral professionals to understand that the consumer has changed and they can't keep trying to change their mind. What they need to do is listen to the consumer and adapt what they offer to meet the needs of the consumer. 10, 15 years ago, they could afford to do that before the internet, because at that point, the only information that you could get on funerals and cemeteries was pretty much at the funeral home or at the cemetery. Today, you can get all that information online. And so the consumer is much more educated and can really advocate for exactly what they want. It's going to happen. I think we're really, really close in terms of mass acceptance and funeral directors and cemeterians realizing that this is not going anywhere and they need to be offering these alternatives to families. I'm going to see if I can play you this video. This was a TikTok that a funeral home put online several years ago. It got hundreds of thousands of views. A lot of times I do this presentation, I do it for funeral professionals, and the reason I choose this slide is because of all the comments and people saying, I want it, I love it. Why didn't anyone tell me this is available? And so just illustrates my point that the consumer's already there and they want these products and these services. So, I'm going to go through some of the products that we offer. I'm not going to get into too much depth, but I'm happy at the end of the presentation to answer more questions. One of the obvious products for natural burial are shrouds. We have a couple of different styles of shrouds. There are other shrouds on the market made of different materials. We have bamboo fabric shrouds, which are the two on the right. And then we have cotton shrouds, which are the ones on the left. And shrouds are basically a wrap for the body. Sometimes they have handles. 3 of the 4 of ours have handles that make it easy to move the body and carry the body. One of them is more just of a wrap, and it needs to be used either with a casket or a carrier of some kind. The shroud in the top right actually has a pouch that you could slide a backboard into if that was something that was necessary or desired. Here's a little short video of an event we did here in Albuquerque with Gail Rubin, and we did some shrouding demonstrations, or we let people do some work on some of the shrouds.
There you go. You pick up from here. And then hold the end over the face like we're doing, perfect. And then fold over the side, yes. The side. And then this. And tie a pretty bow, make sure you do a square knot so they don't come on. There you go.
Yeah, so they were having some fun playing around with the shrouds. We also provide carriers. So if somebody wanted to make it a little bit easier for transporting or moving or cremating or burying a shrouded body, these are a really nice way to go. I'll talk about some of the specifications of the product in a minute. We also obviously carry caskets, and all of our caskets and shrouds are certified fair trade. They all have a solid timber base. They were all weight tested at 350 pounds. They all have natural unbleached cotton linings. None of them have any metals, screws, finishes, plastic, polyester in them. They're all made in northern Bangladesh in an economic zone that provides reliable, consistent employment for people in one of the poorest parts of one of the poorest countries in the world. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. The caskets can be used for natural burial, or they can be cremated. This is a seagrass casket. It's essentially made of willow, but the previous one was also willow. The willow grows in China. It doesn't grow in Bangladesh, but we weave it in Bangladesh. We also have some bamboo caskets that do grow, and bamboo does grow in Bangladesh. And so we work with local farmers to harvest bamboo that grows in between fields of other cultivated crops. And then we process it and turn it into the caskets within a few miles of where the bamboo actually was growing. The handles are not decorative, they are functional, and you can use them for lifting and carrying. And you can see that in the top right corner, all of our caskets come with what we call a viewing lid, because these lids are not hinged. And the main lid that comes with the unit is a full lid. We do also sell a partial or a viewing lid that can be used for either a short goodbye or an open casket if the family wanted to do something like that. Yeah, I want to talk also a little bit about cremation. I mentioned that, cremation in most markets is anywhere between 60 and 90%. I mean, if you go to Seattle or some of these cities, 90%, these major metropolitan areas, even in the South, like Raleigh, North Carolina. I was in Raleigh, North Carolina a year or so ago talking to a funeral home there, and they were like at 80% cremation. And so, cremation is here to stay, and we need to look at, how we deal with cremation from a business perspective in a funeral home, from a dignity perspective with regards to the family, and from an environmental perspective. Like I said, cremation rate's already over 60%. It's projected to be 65% by 2027. And it's probably going to keep rising until it's in the 70 or 80% range. That's a vast change from when I got in the business. When I got in the business, 75% of people were buried, 25% of people were cremated. So there's been a huge shift in just what people are choosing in terms of disposition. From a funeral home perspective, this is the challenge that they have. And sometimes I don't think they even realize it. But if you think about 25 years ago, 7 out of 10 people walking into the funeral home were choosing a $7,000 or $8,000 burial. Today, 7 out of 10 people are walking in the funeral home and they're choosing a $2,000 cremation. So every single family that goes into a funeral home, or a significant percentage of families going to a funeral home and making arrangements, is going to spend a significant amount less than they would have spent 25 years ago. So from a funeral home business perspective, how do they remain relevant? How do they remain profitable? How do they pay their mortgage, their staff, all the costs they need to pay when you're in this kind of environment, right? And the industry did it to themselves. I mean, I remember when I got in this business, literally being at conventions, and there was debates and presentations about, should I put cremation on my sign out front? Darren's Funeral Home and cremation, I know I talked to funeral directors that said, yeah, when they do a cremation, they just give the family the plastic bag and hope that it's insulting enough that they next time choose burial, right? Trying to shame people into buying, what they didn't want, which was a conventional funeral. And I believe that back in those days, they would be funeral directors that say, we don't do cremation here, go see XYZ down the street. And XYZ down the street had a metal building with a retort, a cooler, a removal vehicle, and pretty much what you got was this. You got the cremation occurred in a cardboard box, and you got a black plastic box let back, and it was, $1,000 transaction. And so funeral professionals, in a way, educated families on what cremation was. It's this. But if you go to Canada, you go to the UK, cremation is just everything else is more or less the same in terms of services and ceremony. The only thing, instead of going to the cemetery and burying a body, you go to the crematory and cremate a body. So they haven't really experienced this same issue until more recently. And so, the industry is trying to figure out, how do we re-educate consumers to build back value? How do we create value for families so that they're willing to spend more than $1,000 or $2,000 on a direct cremation? And so one of the things that we've really worked on in terms of increasing the value of the cremation for family and actually having something tangible that consumers understand the value of and are willing to pay for, in an environment where typically you were offered various types of cardboard, from the ugly to the pretty, right? And they ranged from $200 or $100 up to $1,000. Pretty much, if you went into a funeral home and you opted for cremation, these were the choices you had. And most people, since they're not stupid, choose the least expensive, which is the cardboard box. And that also creates a revenue challenge for funeral homes. And so what we created is this bamboo container to be used instead of cardboard. Obviously, it's not the same price. It's more expensive. It's certified fair trade. As I mentioned, this bamboo that we use grows in northern Bangladesh. It's also certified fair trade. And so we've worked with funeral homes to remove cardboard from their selection and offer and use bamboo for cremation. And I'll talk a little bit more about that and why it's better for the environment. And also from a business perspective, I'll talk a little bit about that. Obviously, if you're not putting people in a $95 or $200 cardboard box and you're selling a $400 or $500 bamboo container, you're going to see your revenues increase. So this is the bamboo container. It has solid timber base. It's made by hand from bamboo that's harvested locally to the factory. Has a quilt in the bottom, and it has a bamboo headrest. We also have an updated version of that, an upgraded version of that actually is fully lined, has handles, and is slightly deeper, and it also comes with a Memorial Tree certificate. Something like this would be more appropriate for if there was going to be like an off-site service, because it has the handles and is easier to move, versus the simple bamboo that is just supposed to be really, really simple. It doesn't even have a lining. So that kind of shows you the difference between the two. On the right, you have the simple bamboo. It has the headrest, and on the left, you have the 4-point. It is fully lined with the same natural unbleached cotton lining that the caskets have in them. They also come with the viewing lid if families want that. So, what makes bamboo green? Well, it grows really fast. It doesn't require fertilizers. It grows very dense. And as I say, the bamboo that we use is not even commercially cultivated. It just grows wild between fields of other cultivated crops. It's very, very strong, and it burns really well. And I'll show you some data around that. So simple bamboo, it's sustainably harvested. Bamboo is very renewable because it grows very quickly. This product is produced very close to where the bamboo actually grows, has no toxic finishes or glues or staples. The other thing about this product that's really cool is it comes flat packed. So it has a much lower carbon footprint because it comes in about a box that's about 6 or 7 inches deep. And we ship it to our customers that way. Bamboo also burns clean. It burns at a lower temperature, so you can use less gas, right? It also burns much quicker and more completely, so you have purer remains. You don't have a bunch of ash in there. It also doesn't emit any toxic chemicals. When it burns, it emits oxygen primarily, water, and then a little bit of carbon dioxide. Unlike the blue line, which is all the other things that typical cremation containers release because of polyester linings, plastic, zip ties, those types of things. Some of those chemicals that are released are carcinogenic. And so the beauty of the bamboo is it's not polluting the environment that we all live in. And that's a major selling point for funeral directors when they are conveying to families why they use cardboard, why they use bamboo and not cardboard. So we have a firm here in Albuquerque that we work with that does about over 1,500 cremations. They have 5 locations, and we put this product in to this funeral home, and this is one of the managing funeral directors talking about the product and how it was received by families.
The response to the bamboo containers has been overwhelmingly positive. People like that it has also a positive impact, being a little cleaner burning, comes from a renewable resource, and allows them to honor their loved one, even if it's with simple cremation arrangements, to have something that is needed logistically, but also again reflects the values of a person. I had a family that wanted to honor their loved one, came in, told me specifically when we discussed the container for cremation, this was just a very simple cremation arrangement in terms of their requests. And before I could speak, they said, we want her in the cardboard box. They said, we've kind of moved to a new bamboo container that's simple, a little bit more cleaner burning and made of renewable resources. They kind of perked up and listened at that point. And when they saw the picture, this was for a lady, really resonated with them and made a connection to some things and styles in her home. Price, that was not an issue at all at that point. They didn't know what they wanted until they saw it. And something I hear oftentimes is, my dad was a simple guy. He was not one for elaborate things, but still want the same dignity and respect that they would want shown to him during his life. The bamboo container has been great. That allows us, quite frankly, to move away from something that was a bit of a disservice in funeral service when cremation was treated like the other. So using like a basic cardboard box that you would find a refrigerator in was not really the level of dignity we wanted to show people.
The other cool thing about when they put the simple bamboo into their product offerings, you can see there's a perfect alignment in terms of customer satisfaction. They also increased their revenue. So you have a customer, from a business perspective, you have a customer that's spending more with you, and data shows that they're happier about it. And to me, it makes perfect sense because, if you're not putting people's loved ones in a cardboard box, they might actually be happier about that. So we've done it in different ways. We've put merchandising displays, we've done flyers, and the funeral homes that we work with, we encourage them to make it the minimum, because we know most people won't buy up because it's going to be burned. The beauty of the simple bamboo is it has tangible value that consumers understand. Funeral directors can talk about fair trade, they can talk about renewability, they can talk about low carbon footprint, they can talk about clean burning, and consumers understand that and are willing to pay for it. So let's talk about fair trade real quick. I know I'm gonna have to speed it up here a little bit. There's 10 principles of fair trade. Only one of them really refers to environmental issues. Most of it is about social consciousness. And so, we take great pride in making sure that we are paying fair wages, employing equal numbers of men and women, ensuring there's no child or forced labor. I've personally been to the factory in Bangladesh on several occasions, and the factory actually has an impact manager that's I kind of call it like an HR person on steroids. So they help people with issues that an ordinary company would not help with, like domestic abuse, like predatory lending, where you go to your boss and you mention any of those things, it's pretty much, it's like, well, sorry, can't help you with that. So, we are aware that some of the places that we do business with, people have not had the advantages that we have had. And in some places they can't read and write, they can't tell the time, there are no paved roads, you can't just run down to Walmart or Lowe's to get something. So there's definitely challenges in doing business in some of these areas, and we want to make sure that we leave these communities better than we found them. So Bangladesh is known as one of the garment capital of the world, and so that's great. The challenge is that it can be cyclical, and 1 month you can have a job and the next you can't. And so we're trying to bring consistent employment and build skills in the areas that we work. So going on to cremation, I think it's really important for funeral professionals to know what people intend to do with cremated remains. When I walk into a funeral home, many funeral homes still have bronze, marble, wood, ceramic, designed for permanently keeping cremated remains. What they fail to realize is that the majority of people that cremate intend to scatter cremated remains. And so they need to have a selection of products that make it easy to do that. And so you can see on this chart, only 15% of people say they're actually going to keep or inter the urns. The rest of the people either don't have a preference, say they're going to do something else, but I would wager 60% of people ultimately will scatter cremated remains and not put them in the cemetery. So we at Passages create a large selection of urns that are made from sustainable materials that enable people to place cremated remains in the environment. So we also know that a lot of people want to put remains in the water, whether it's the ocean, the lake, a river. And so we make a lot of products that are designed to biodegrade. In the case of these products, they're made of paper. Same thing with these products, or to dissolve. These are sand and gelatin and Himalayan rock salt, and they will dissolve like a sugar cube in your tea in minutes, completely dissolve. The other products are made of paper, and they will biodegrade naturally over time, like a leaf falls from a tree. It's there tomorrow, it's there next week, maybe there in a month, but it'll be gone in time. All of our products are designed to float briefly so that people can spread petals, sing a song, read a prayer, have a few moments, and then sink in their entirety. They're not designed to break up on the surface. And they can sink, they can float for 5, 10, 15 minutes. It just depends on the product, the environment they're used in, and how much remains are in there. The heavier, the more remains that are in there, the quicker they'll sink. We make urns out of bamboo ply, handmade paper. We don't cut the tree down to make the paper. We harvest the bark, use that bark to make the paper. The tree continues to grow. The urn in the middle is a gourd. We buy gourds, we hollow them out, we pass electricity through them, which gives that very unique look. And to me, that's like a piece of art. No one would know that that's an urn. Each one is different. The piece of wood on the top is from the Rio Grande. It's driftwood. And then we have a 25-gram Tree of Life bronze medallion that hangs on it in the middle. We have urns like the urn on the right is made from from repurposed or upcycled timber. So when we make the coffins and the caskets, we have little pieces of extra timber. We use those to make a mosaic and turn it into an urn. The urn on the left is made of a compostable material, similar to what you might find, a knife and fork at Whole Foods being made of. We also have urns made of tree that you can grow a tree in. The cool thing about this product is the cremated remains go in the bottom. There's a cork divider in the middle, and that expands to become the soil that you would plant a tree in. That's what it looks like. It's basically a keepsake. It can accommodate 90 cubic inches, but this is the cool thing about it. You can actually keep it on your kitchen table, your dining room table for weeks or months. And when the urn starts to crack, that's your indication it's time to plant it. A lot of people are skeptical about urns and cremated trees and cremated remains, but you can see that very bright emerald green shows the tree is growing. I certainly wouldn't claim that cremated remains are good for a tree, but we've created a system that lowers the pH of the cremated remains as you water the plant, and as it filters through that soil disc that I mentioned, it actually lowers the pH, enabling the tree to grow. Scattering, this is what most people are doing, pouring cremated remains out the kind of what I'd call the old-fashioned way. Here's a picture of a family in Hawaii doing it, off an outrigger. I'm going to skip this video because I know we're running out of time probably. But it just gives you an idea of the choices. We have 26 different designs of scattering tubes. It allows people to go to unique, sentimentally significant locations and scatter cremated remains, whether it's on the top of Kachina Peak in Taos or wherever you want to scatter, wherever you love to go, right? We created kits so that people can split the cremated remains. Also so that it can encourage participation. So instead of grandma scattering grandpa, you can now have the kids and the grandkids all participate in doing it. And before I wrap up, the last thing that I want to talk about is, if all these people are scattering, where do we go to pay respects, right? If we're not going to the cemetery anymore, where you can walk to a grave, see who's buried there, pay respects, and spend time, how do we know where these people are? And so, we knew that was an issue, and we knew that with scattering, often there's no community aspect, there's no memorialization. Often friends and family don't know where to go to pay respects. We're not anti-cemetery. We believe that cemeteries have value. They bring people together. You can go and pay respects there, and they support strong community. And so our solution to that was to enable people to geolocate exactly where they scatter cremated remains. And so every one of our urns comes with the ability for free to put a pin on a map where you scattered cremated remains. And then you can upload photos and create a memorial. So if you hover over one of those pins, it'll open up with a photo and a name if the family put a photo there. And then they can basically create a page. This is a person who passed away in Australia, the gentleman, but this is what their family put on their Return.Life memorial. They uploaded all these photos of him. This is all done by the family. Funeral professionals can help, but it's all public and it's all done by the family, but it's just a free feature that enables us to kind of create a community of people that have scattered, a digital community, a digital family. And people can share ideas, people can look and see what other people have done, what unique products they've used, and unique things they've done to celebrate their loved one. The way it's done from our perspective, we've created every single urn comes with a unique number, and that number that's on the urn or on the tag is when you go to eTurn.life, you enter that number and it enables you to create an account for free, and then you can either drag a pin, you can put in the longitude and the latitude, and then you can upload photos and create your memorial. So to wrap up, and I'm sure we'll have some questions, for those of you that have been in the business for a while and around death care for a while will know, and probably many of you are in the business because the consumer has changed and there's more demand for more unique, meaningful, and sustainable memorials. People just want to celebrate in a different way. They don't love their loved ones any less because they choose direct cremation or want to work with a death doula or something like that. They just want to do it in a different way, and they don't want, an industrial, cold type of service. They want something warmer and more meaningful. The one thing that I always tell funeral professionals is this is something that you may not be comfortable with, you may not be fully educated on, but the consumer's already there. They're ready. They want this, and they're going to drive it more and more. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I would be very happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Really cool. I just want to say thank you. I learned some things I didn't know, and I really appreciate your approach to all of this, how conscious, it is every step of the way, but acknowledging that cremation is the lion's share of people's choices. And then, okay, if that's the choice that they're going to make, how can we move within that space to create improvement, significant improvement? So I just want to say that I appreciate the approach. And even though this is a conversation I've had a lot of times, I not only learned things from you, but you came at it from a different perspective, really. So I appreciated the lessons.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of my biggest pet peeves, Aaron knows this, is that I get why people scatter, but I really truly believe that we need a place to visit and go to. So you came up
Bridged that.
with
Yeah.
it, which is
So
brilliant and
cool.
amazing and
Yeah.
reaches people where they're at, and people can understand that. And it's also kind of cool because you can kind of explore other people and their stories, which is one of my favorite things to do at cemeteries, is to walk around and be like, ooh, I wonder what your story is.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there are some companies that are doing like similar things where you can scan a code that's on a headstone or something like that and get the story, but to have it be completely virtual because there's no trace of scattering, right? Like that just gives
Right.
you really cool history and a sacredness to places.
Right. I was in Donegal, Ireland this summer at a beautiful secluded spot on the ocean. And there was a huge rock, I mean a massive rock, like 50 feet, like protruding into the ocean. And someone had put like a plaque on it, like it was someone had put a memorial there. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. But if we all did that, what's that place going to look like 20
Yeah.
years from now, right? So to recognize that that was a special place for someone, and someone is, their remains are now there, that's important. But it could be done in a more modern,
Yeah.
less intrusive way, right? That preserves that beautiful place for
Yeah.
everyone.
Right. I mean, for the right amount of time, because one of the questions, that we ask in this work when it comes to burial is how long should there be a physical reminder of your life on the earth, right? Because
Right.
for how long will family members visit you? At what time should you maybe not claim a permanent space anymore? And the same thing goes even for something like that. And I don't know that there's a right or a wrong answer, but it's something we
Right.
should be thinking about.
Right. Exactly.
All right, so the obvious question for me is, can this be translated to water cremation remains just the same?
I believe it can be. I mean, definitely from the Turn.Life and the memorialization for sure. We have urns that are larger, that will accommodate, I guess the 20 or 30% more remains that typically are received from alkali hydrolysis. So yeah, I don't see any reason why not.
Okay, yeah.
I really liked that you have the multiple scattering too. That was something that I was like, oh yeah, that would have really been helpful for me
Like
in the past.
the hours you spent separating the ashes for clients. Yeah.
Yeah, or just them awkwardly doing it and passing it along and just not. But it was
Right.
interesting. So when I first started in the funeral industry, it was 20 years ago. So I was one of the people that was like 70% burial, and cremation was exactly what you said. It was done in Lake Elsinore, California, and like far away and very, we don't do cremation. And now it's totally changed, except for the crematories are still, ugh, like you don't want to necessarily bring families there. And you
Right.
brought up England, because they actually have very beautiful crematories and the families always go there, just like you would for a burial.
Mhm.
Do you see there ever being a shift like that where people can get more involved, or is that more? I know it's like the EPA was, this has to be in an industrial area, that kind of thing. But
Right.
with the amount of cremations that are taking place, I just would assume that people would want to have a more beautiful crematory experience. I don't know if you've worked with anybody who, here in the States at least.
I don't think anyone is doing it quite like they do it in Europe. I mean, I actually remember going to my great grandfather's cremation, and it was in that kind of environment where it actually looks and feels like a religious institution. It looks and feels a little bit like a church with pews, but the
Yeah.
body was at the front in a casket, like a regular casket, like a wood casket. And then, when the service was done, it literally like went on a conveyor into the back. I mean, the assumption was that, okay, it's pretty much going to go straight into the crematory. Who knows what happens in the back? But um, I mean, I think there's a model for that, and people are creating more attractive cremation spaces in their properties where it's available, right? And making them. I think part of the challenge with all of this is from a from an outsider's perspective. If I look in and I kind of look from 30,000 feet down on what a funeral looks like, and I think about participation versus spectating, right? So, the crematories that funeral homes are putting in now, they may have a door to go in, but it's often like you have a big window or something, so you can watch. It's still like spectating. How do we get people to actually participate? I mean, and I know you could probably go walk and push the button, but I think like in an environment when chain of custody is really important also, it seems like there could be multiple benefits to having the family more involved throughout the process, right?
Yeah.
So
Lauren's little heart's fluttering over there.
Yeah.
That's the home funeral guide and the death doula kind of space is how can we get the families more involved? And yes, pushing the button or doing a witness cremation is great, and we want people to do that if they want to do it. But also just generally helping prepare the body, helping with washing it or blessing it or dressing it or adorning the person or, just being involved at any point really from the time of death up until the time of final disposition, and being with the body in a way that is loving and serves it. And it can look any number of ways. It doesn't have to look any certain way at all. It's just really about the time and the touch and the intimacy.
right, right. When you were talking, I have two stories come to mind. One is, I talked to a person who actually owns a couple of funeral homes and a cemetery in Tulsa, Oklahoma, of all places. And he got into the business. He's a little bit older, and he got into the business because when I think it was his mother passed away, she was in hospice, and he talks about the stark difference between the conclusion of hospice care and the beginning of funeral care. And he's like, whoa, it was like getting a bucket of cold water in my face in terms of like, you got this supportive, warm, feely experience, and then it just becomes like this kind of cold, industrial, institutional experience. And it's like, how can we soften that, right? The other story that kind of comes to my mind is my mother-in-law passed away in December, and we worked with hospice, and we were looking to work with a death doula. It didn't ultimately work out that way. But she died in her home. And when I think about the experience and having my wife and her family, her brothers and sisters around, just the power in that, is amazing. And, they still have tight connections with the funeral industry. So they were able to come with a hearse and basically casket her in their home. But, they dressed her and bathed her and casketed her. And it just feels like that's going to be a big part of what's going to become in the future.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it's a reclamation in a lot of ways because it's the way that it was done up until it became an industry, right? But then it's like a modern reclamation because you're saying we can do this and we can bring the hearse. We can do this, and I love the idea of like a rotating altar on the church that goes back
Right.
behind the scenes. So that's what it is. It's like the opportunity for people to reclaim traditions, or to create new traditions, or just really to bring whatever consciousness and love they, want to it, but with modern innovation, without necessarily getting rid of the good parts of the industry.
Right.
I have one more question and then we can open it up. With everything that Erin just said and knowing, so when I worked at a green funeral home, we didn't do any embalming, even, shipping them through airlines. People are always like, oh, you have to embalm. I'm like, no, they have Ziegler cases and ice. Like, there's always ways. But it was the funeral homes on the receiving end who often were like, absolutely not. No, like we cannot have an unembalmed body viewed. No, we will not invite the family in to do the dressing. That will traumatize them. How do you work with those people? I'm
You
trying to.
said at the beginning, solving problems that funeral professionals didn't know they had, and that is what I thought of. Like, yeah.
Yep. I mean, they know
Yeah.
that it's a problem, and we are so grateful that consumers are asking. That's why we do education. It's not to educate the funeral homes, it's to educate the people that will make a change in the funeral industry because they have to change. But that has been my brick wall since I was even in the funeral industry.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I think sometimes we need to, and I've been at presentations to cemeterians and got questions about like natural burial and the grave filling up with water and what do you do and this could go wrong and this and that, what about the grave to this side of it and stuff. And the reality is there's going to be challenges. There's challenges with conventional, embalming a body, there's challenges. When I started my company, my office is right next to the embalming room in the funeral home. I mean, we started our business in
That's
the funeral home.
ironic.
Yeah, right. But it's kind of like, just like with natural burial and green burial, or home funerals, stuff can go an unexpected way. But it's also the same with a conventional burials. Like, my father-in-law would have stories about he'd back the hearse up to the funeral home to go to the cemetery, and when they went to start the hearse, it wouldn't start. And then they had to take the casket out and put it in the back of a pickup truck. Then they talked to the family, after the funeral, they're like, yeah, my dad said he'd never ride in a black car. And it's like they find the funny part of it. And so my point is that, you know, doing it the way we're talking about doing it is really no more difficult and doesn't entail, any more risk or hardship or challenge than dealing with it the conventional way.
Yeah, it's that unembalmed part for viewings that is what is seems to be so hard, where they're like, ah, you can't do that. Like we have to make them look. And
Uh,
it's I've had so many people say, yeah, we'll do natural, but no viewings. And that's like my favorite thing in the world is facilitating that because you need that hands-on time with your loved one after death. And that's a huge gap that also has taken place with direct cremations is the families don't have that involvement. So I think that that's been the challenge of like, yeah, okay, we'll do green, but no, the family can't view them or be with them because they're not embalmed. And so I don't know if there's ever going to be the right solution or way to talk to funeral directors about that.
right. I feel like, embalming, whatever your feeling is on the invasiveness of it and the um, chemicals that are used in it and the impact it has on, embalmers. What is it actually doing to the psyche of the family in terms of why are we trying to make someone who is deceased look like they're alive, right? And I mean, I've had stories from funeral directors where, the where where the funeral home thinks the value is completely different from where the family thinks the value is. And so I've had families talk to me and tell me about, yeah, the funeral home kept bugging me about shoes. Bring the shoes. The family's like, she don't need no shoes. She's not walking anywhere. Can you stop bothering me about bringing shoes? I'm good without shoes for her. But to the funeral director, it's like, nope, learned this in mortuary school. They need to be fully dressed,
Yep.
made up, shoes, and then like things like, oh, we're gonna have a service, even though the person's not cremated yet. We're gonna have a service. You need to put an urn at the front. Oh, and then we're gonna charge you for using that empty urn. It's like, really? The family knows the body is not cremated yet. Why are we pretending that there's
Mhm.
an urn at the front of the chapel? It's like, come on, guys. Let's have a
You know that you're going to scatter her, but you can rent this really expensive, beautiful marble urn, so everyone thinks it's, yeah, I hated that at
right,
SCI. That was like,
right. Just like
yeah.
get, have some read the room kind of thing.
So it's somehow trying to break down everything that they learned that is pretty much
Right.
sales tactics, which when you say that to a funeral director, boy, oh boy, do they get mad. But you said it. It's like, but what does the consumer actually find value in? It
Right.
is not what you learned in mortuary school. Listen to them. Don't practice these same things. But I swear, some people will die on their grave or whatever to say,
Right.
absolutely not. This is the way it is. And I hope that those people eventually go out of business.
Well, and
Well,
it's their belief that that is what's best for the family, that seeing them a certain way, embalmed, preserved, will cause less trauma to the family. And I just think that's the family's choice.
right.
What doctorates of psychology do they have behind that statement? It's
I
sound
always want to always come back and be like, so actually, when I worked at a funeral home that only did embalming, we got complaints all the time. Natural never got a complaint. Like they were like, oh, wow, they look so peaceful versus, oh, why do they have a tan?
and
And
smell
why do
funny.
dad's lips look like you have pink lipstick on them? Oh, because we do.
Right. And to your
Right.
larger point, sorry guys, we're going over time because now we're getting into the good part, but like to your larger point of why do we, it's messed up psychologically to want to see a dead person and think that they're alive. Like, why are we so dissociated from natural cycles and from the reality of this in humanity? And that's really the big problem. And that kind of fuels everything else. Why it has become so industrial and less human over the years is because of that disconnect. And I guess it's a
Right.
chicken and an egg thing in a way, like how it started, but it's where it's at.
Right. Like if the funeral home whisks the body away right after death and then embalms it and makes it look like it's not dead, then it literally robs the family and friends of actually coming to terms with the person that this person's gone, right? And I do feel like it might affect the grieving, right?
Of
I mean,
course.
yeah, it's not easy. It's not like, and we can't take the pain away,
Yeah.
right? There's always going to be that pain, but how do we make it so that people can actually realize and understand that this person's gone? And the sooner that can happen, I think, the better it's going to be for everyone, right? Than trying to work it out over many, many years.
It suspends the shock and the denial, phases. I think
Right,
we need to immerse ourselves in the grief and in the reality of it in the beginning.
right.
So we didn't even open it up to questions. If you guys have any last minute questions you want to ask Darren, right now is the time, but if not, this has been wonderful. I'm sure me and Aaron could talk to you forever. You're definitely our people, and I'm very grateful that you've been doing this for 25 years and that you kept with it because this was not something that people were talking about 20 years or 25 years ago, but it was so crucial and so needed. And thank you for being the brave ones to go out and say, yeah, we need this.
You got it. Thank you.
All
All
right.
right.
Good afternoon, everyone. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Karen.
Bye.